A-10 Warthog, also known as the Thunderbolt II, has been a staple in the United States Air Force since the 1970s. Designed as a close air support aircraft, the Warthog has gained a reputation as a powerful and effective weapon in combat. However, there has been much debate over whether the A-10 is capable of holding its own in a dogfight against other aircraft. Some experts argue that the Warthog's primary role is to provide support for ground troops and engage targets with its powerful 30mm GAU-8 Avenger cannon, rather than engage in aerial combat. They argue that the A-10's relatively slow speed and lack of maneuverability make it vulnerable in a dogfight against more agile fighter jets. Others, however, believe that the A-10's durability, firepower, and advanced avionics make it a formidable opponent in air-to-air combat. They point to instances where the Warthog has successfully engaged and defeated enemy fighter jets in combat situations. The debate over the A-10's capabilities in a dogfight is ongoing, and opinions remain divided. But one thing is certain: the A-10 Warthog has earned its reputation as a powerful and effective close air support aircraft, and will continue to play a vital role in military operations for years to come. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, more commonly known as the Warthog, is a legendary air support platform that has earned its reputation as the infantryman's favorite aircraft throughout decades of combat operations. But the Air Force knows that a near-peer fight against an enemy with real airpower will mean there's a chance A-10s may find themselves stuck in some fights they aren't supposed to win. That's why the Air Force Weapons School starts its A-10 curriculum with basic fighter maneuvers. The A-10 was purpose-built to fill a capability gap in America's airpower arsenal that had nothing to do with engaging enemy airplanes. After decades of focus on building faster, higher-flying fighters and bombers for a potential nuclear war with the Soviet Union, America found itself with no aircraft that were slow-moving, low-flying, and resilient enough to be really effective at close air support in Vietnam. The Air Force's jets simply couldn't fly slowly enough to spot targets in dense jungle, didn't have the fuel to make multiple passes, and weren't resilient enough to absorb much in the way of enemy gunfire. And that's where Fairchild Republic came in with a design for an unusual aircraft that prized resiliency, redundancy, and function over all else. It was nearly as long as it was wide, and the fuselage was little more than a massive 30mm rotary cannon with a cockpit stuck on top. Two General Electric TF-34GE100A turbofans engines were mounted high on the fuselage to protect it from sucking in dirt and debris on austere airstrips near the fight, and internally, redundant hydraulic systems and a titanium armor tub shielded the pilot and control systems from small arms fire. The result was a jet with practically unparalleled toughness, the ability to unleash 3,900 depleted uranium 30mm rounds at a target per minute, and a turn radius that would make any modern fighter blush. All that comes at a cost, however. The A-10 is a big jet without big power. A-10 pilots often joke that it really only has three settings: off, taxiing, and max power. Pilots from other aircraft can be even crueler, often kidding that the A-10 is so slow that it runs the constant risk of bird strikes from behind. Even the most modern A-10C, with updated cockpits and the ability to carry and leverage more munitions than ever, aren't particularly well suited for a fight with most fighters in service today. It simply wasn't built for it. But with America pivoting back toward great power competition and the A-10 slated to remain in service until the 2040s, this CAS champ is once again facing the possibility of having to square off with jets that were built specifically to hunt down and kill planes that can move a lot quicker than the Warthog does. Most operational A-10 pilots don't put much thought into dogfights. While we tend to think of combat aircraft in the individual sense, America leverages them as pieces of a broad combat strategy. In other words, the U.S. plans its operations around leaning into the strengths of different platforms and avoiding their weaknesses. As such, A-10s often operate in concert with air superiority fighters like the legendary F-15 Eagle, who are responsible for engaging enemy fighters before they have a chance to square off with any slow-moving warthogs. But as famed writer and former F-14 radar intercept officer Ward Carroll pointed out in our discussion about speed versus stealth in 21st century dogfighting, big wars against developed nations get messy. And in that mess lies the ever-present chance that things aren't going to go exactly as planned. With dozens or even hundreds of aircraft in a fight, it's entirely possible that a few enemy fighters might make their way past an A-10's air superiority teammates. If that were to happen, the low and slow Warthog would certainly have its hands full, but that's not to say that it wouldn't stand a chance. Twice each year, the Air Force sends its best A-10 pilots to weapons school, where they learn advanced tactics they can bring back to their respective wings to teach the rest of the force. While you might think A-10 pilots would jump straight into delivering firepower to ground targets, they actually start with BFM. If a leaker, or enemy fighter, does manage to get through, they'll be in for a surprise. As American fighter pilots learned firsthand over Vietnam, being slow and maneuverable can work out in a gunfight against fast-moving jets. While the A-10 can't outrun a fighter, it can outearn them. The only fighter in Uncle Sam's arsenal that could compete with that is the thrust-vectoring F-22 Raptor, and it would have to slow down to around 300 knots to do it, eliminating its speed advantage against the A-10. Remember, dogfights don't have to play out over full minutes like we see in the movies. In fact, if things go well for one pilot, a dogfight might last exactly how long it takes the two jets to complete a single loop after the merge. Put simply, the A-10's tight turn radius allows it to orient its nose at the enemy fighter faster than the enemy can get its guns pointed back at the A-10. To make matters worse for the fighter, the incredibly powerful 30mm GAU-8 the A-10 is packing can shoot an aircraft down from far further than the 20mm cannons commonly found on other fighters. As powerful as the GAU-8 is, the Warthog has other tools to help it win a fight with an opposing jet. In case of a dogfight, the A-10 also carries a pair of AIM-9M Sidewinder missiles. AIM-9s are infrared-guided weapons with a range of 22 miles, giving the Warthog the punch it needs to engage an enemy fighter at a distance. The combination of the A-10's tight turn radius and AIM-9s makes for a frightening 1-2 punch for aggressive enemy fighters. If an enemy jet finds itself in close quarters with an A-10, it's left to choose between two difficult options. You can try to out-turn the A-10 and fire your weapons before it can, or you can turn tail and run from the BRRRT. The problem is, if you turn and run, you're flying right into the heat-seeking Sidewinder's trap. While no A-10 pilot has managed to shoot down an enemy fighter in combat, the platform does have a few notches in its belt for downing enemy aircraft. During the Persian Gulf War, A-10s found renewed life after more than a decade of stagnating under its counter-Soviet role. In just 40 days, the A-10 racked up an astonishing 987 kills against enemy tanks, 926 against enemy artillery pieces, 1,355 against other combat vehicles, 10 against enemy fighters on the ground, and 2 against airborne enemy helicopters. Ultimately, the A-10 Thunderbolt II was built to do a job that had nothing to do with winning a dogfight, but the Warthog has been defying expectations since its very inception, finding new purpose after the fall of the Soviet Union. Surviving retirement again and again, and most impressive of all, returning safely after being positively riddled with holes from enemy fire. It seems only fitting that it would defy expectations yet again in the realm of air-to-air combat. Because winning a fight isn't always about who has the fastest jet or the most powerful missiles. Sometimes it might come down to nothing more than one tight loop and a veritable laser beam of depleted uranium 30mm rounds.